Hi, everybody, and welcome to tonight's episode of Ramblemancy. That's going really well so far. Um, don't worry about it. You don't need to know what happened behind the scenes. Hi,
Some
welcome.
great warm-ups is what happened behind the scenes.
There's just a lot going on over here, and I mislabeled my Stream Deck buttons, and we're fine now. Everything's fine here. How are you?
Yep, how are you? I think my favorite button on here that I have labeled on I for one of my buttons I have the little Ramblin chaos emote that you can see in chat right now, and
Right.
that's very fun.
Mhm.
But also I do have one that's just titled elevator, and when I push it, it plays elevator music. It's maybe my favorite button on my Stream Deck.
Yeah. Man. Well, hi, everybody. Welcome to tonight's episode of Ramblemancy. We're here with another free-range ramble. Pew, 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 pew. I don't know why I did that.
It's
It
the
just-
bisexual finger guns. They're infectious.
Okay, well,
I use
again,
them and then,
I maintain I don't know why I did that. That doesn't help explain this situation, John, in this particular case. Yeah, so I don't know that we have a lot of in the way of announcements. But in case you are here right now and we're not here last week for our announcements, what I will say is right now we're working on just sort of revamping a lot of the channel, not just stuff about the channel itself, but like how we do things here. So the next few months are going to be pretty content bare, except for Ramblemancy, and some other exceptions, which shall be noted soon. TM. But yeah, we're gonna be basically focusing on trying to make sure that everything is that we don't have any like waste in terms of um our operation and our energy. Making sure that we keep like kind of whittling everything that we have down to sort of like giving you the concentrated stuff that you want and not any of the extra unnecessary things that we won't have the energy to maintain. So that's kind of what we're working on these days, and yeah, that's what we're doing. So the next, like I said, the takeaway from that is the next few months are going to be pretty content bare on Rule of Lore, other than Ramblemancy. So and then the odd exception here that we already had in the works prior to the beginning of this restructuring. So yeah,
Oh yeah.
which I'm very excited for y'all to see.
It's gonna be great.
We're planning some stuff for Spooky Month, and you'll see it during Spooky Month. We'll announce it before then, obviously, but like, so you'll get to know what it is before that point. But right now, we are still in the process of producing those things, so I'm very excited for y'all to see it. It's
Very exciting.
yeah, it is. I think not to overhype this, but I genuinely don't think that we have seen anything like it on the channel thus far. So I think this is we're entering new territory, and I'm extremely excited. That's it. That's all we got for announcements. I saw Geekouts in the chat. Hi, Geekouts. Rainy is here, and Spigs. Hello, friends. It is Geekouts' birthday today. Happy birthday, Matt. And
Most important announcement.
yes, the most important announcement. Also, it was another moderator's birthday. Was it yesterday? Or was it a couple? Gemini's birthday. Was it?
So many birthday
There's so many
mods.
birthday mods. But yeah, happy birthday,
to
Geekouts,
mods.
and happy birthday, Gemini. Y'all are awesome, and we are very happy that you choose to continue spending your time with us. Vertiman, hello, good to see you. So yeah, and Littlest Drummer, hi, welcome.
Hello.
And he says,
Um,
FYI, I have not started my dress for Bree's wedding. I have not even cleared out the space to bring out my sewing machine. Oh no, you got to get on that, buddy. That's coming right up.
So yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, I don't know that we have a whole lot else in the way of announcements because we're either working on stuff or we are working on things that we can't announce yet, but soon.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
Yeah.
that's it. How? What are we talking about tonight, John?
That's a good question. I did actually have an interesting. I did have a question that I was pondering on my way over here. So I'm not completely bus thrown today.
No, and this was also I was very gentle about the bus throwing today, so it was really more like a a gentle shove in the direction of the bus.
Yeah.
So I think it's more like you're getting on the bus today.
Yeah.
Oh my
yeah,
gosh.
Yeah, I was on my phone and you kind of just like tapped me on the
Like,
shoulder.
hey man,
like,
the
yo,
bus is
dude,
coming. You're gonna miss the bus.
That's the first one we've had. No, we've never had one like that before.
Never before on Ramblemancy. We all made the bus. Anyway, I was this came from a conversation that I was just having in the car while I was out shopping with a friend today. But I think like the question that I have is what part of your personality do you most see reflected in the things that you write or the things that you make or the creative things that you do? And this is a question that goes not just for us here on screen but also for chat, as obviously, like, what part of you do you see most reflected in your work, or just something you even if not most reflected, something you see commonly reflected in your work? And
Wow.
this is I'll start, which is I was driving along with Bree doing some shopping for her wedding today, and we were just on the highway, and I was like, do you ever think about sometimes, because we were at like a stoplight next to an office building, and I could see like a cubicle space that was empty, but like there was a computer and a little jar, like a little mug full of pencils and some other shit, some picture frames and stuff. Like, do you ever think about the fact that right there, right next to us, what is scenery for us, what is something that we drive by then experience for like 4 seconds, is a place that somebody else spends 40 to 50 hours of their week that has a profound meaning for them. They are familiar, like intimately familiar with the sights, the sounds, the smells, the touches, like all of the little things that make that place that place. That's that for somebody else, but it's scenery to us, and that's bad. That's wild to me. Or like, do you ever think about the fact that every single one of these other cars in the road contains between like one and several people who all have for decades and for decades more are leading their own unique wild lives? Like, are you ever just, okay, the question being essentially, are you ever just like suddenly aware of the crushing enormity of humanity?
All too often.
And Bree's response was, John, sometimes I look at the cars and I like to imagine them with faces and personalities.
Good.
Absolutely.
But like that kind of, those little random moments of like introspection, especially as it regards like places and things like that, where I'm like, this is a place that is important to somebody else, or like this is a thing that is like this little animal's whole world is storing food for the winter right now, and it is a passing moment in my life. And so like I see that reflected in my work a lot when I do more like kind of cozy or wistful or introspective games or writing. That notion of like stretching out those mundane little moments and experiencing them. Like the game that I just published, Terminus, I think is a really good example of that, because as a game, it's like half ritual and half tabletop game, because it encourages you to go to a physical, like liminal space, like a park, a coffee shop, a mall, any place that you would go to, but you would also leave. Not someplace you stay or dwell.
Mm-hmm.
And then like walk around and observe things like that. And I'm like, yeah, that's a thing that I see in my, that's a thing about myself that I see in my work.
Man.
That is a good question.
Yeah. I couldn't honestly tell you. I don't think I actually have an answer to this question, and I genuinely think if I were to answer it not having thought about it, I would definitely come out with something really sort of trite and not super insightful or interesting at all, or probably even true, for that matter. So I don't know that I have an answer to that question.
Yeah, it's totally fair. It was just a thing that I was thinking about. Just a thing that I was thinking about earlier. Like, I know we've talked about a lot about creating things and like the ways that we put ourselves into the things that we make.
Mm-hmm.
So And it happens in lots of small, like big and small ways too. Like in some way, like there's a lot of times where I'll look back at a character and be like, oh, you were working something out there, buddy. That like a TTRPG character that I played.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say that doesn't really count as an answer, but anytime I read back on any hot garbage I've given to the tabletop tool chest, I know it's not hot garbage. I just say that, but it's like there's a lot of I feel like I pour a lot into that because that's a very raw thing that we do when we write. There's a lot of us that comes out into that. I think that might be a little bit, at least. I don't really have a full answer to that because that's a good question, and I think a bigger answer is probably on the way at some point, not right now.
I know. I came out of the gate with I feel like I was helped onto the bus, and then I turned around and hulked the bus onto the two of you.
You were helped onto the bus, and then
Right.
John said, "Look at me. I am the captain now," and then ran Freeman and I over.
I am the bus.
It was a big question, to be fair. It was just one that I was thinking about on the way over here, and like I wanted to give myself the platform to talk about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
For sure.
Yeah. I saw Matt said a lot of my personal projects involve or in part deal with isolation, and that's interesting. That's I think that did make me think about something, which is a sort of, it's a partial answer. I would not say that this is the way that I kind of put myself into my writing the most, but it is a way in which I do it. And that a lot of the stuff that I write or whatever has a lot to do with sort of found family dynamic. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that of how I grew up, right? Like I literally growing up, it was just me, my mom, my dad, no extended family, because for various reasons, parents chose to sort of keep extended family at a sort of distance, and like physically and like otherwise. And so for me, a lot of my life has been spent looking for that found family because I knew that's what I would have, right? So I think that tends to come out a lot in the things that I write and make, So thanks, Matt, for saying what you said, because it kind of got me thinking kind of along the similar lines. So yeah.
I think that's a fair answer to that too. Like, it's interesting to me, because obviously, like, when we make things and when we do things, we are the protagonists of all of our own lives, and so you don't notice those things as they're happening, like you don't necessarily. And so sometimes what it takes to notice those kind of emergent themes and stuff in your work is your friend to go, sometimes I imagine the cars with funny faces and personalities. When you're sitting here going, have you ever thought about how terrifically small we are sometimes?
Have you ever, John out here being like, have you ever thought about how utterly meaningless our lives are, and how in the grand scale of the cosmos, each of us is but a grain of sand within a grain of sand, destined to be lost into the infinitesimal.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I thought. A grain of sand within a grain of sand too. That's
I try not to let myself wander down that too far, because it can either rapidly become, instead of just I try to keep it at the stage of kind of a little bit of wonder for the world around me.
Yeah.
Because that can very easily become wildly self-indulgent, dude, you are up your own ass, or it can also just be incredibly nihilistic.
Yeah, 100%. Both things worthy of satire.
Yeah, absolutely. So many fucking edgy atheists that I knew in high school who had to make it everybody else's problem.
They are specifically the reason I don't like telling people that I'm an atheist.
Right, yeah. Because everybody immediately thinks of that asshole in high school who was trying to God isn't real, debate me. I
just don't have that kind of energy. I just don't have it in me to be so ha about things.
Oh,
Mm-hmm.
how did they muster the energy to do that?
I don't know. Like, I don't even have the energy to do that about things that matter, let alone like, you know?
I barely have the energy to like do that about like current politics and
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
that shit matters.
Matt said, I think it's interesting, somewhat humorous, if not outright frustrating, that many people think artistic skills are innate talents. Yes, thank you. Um, but the reality is that some might be naturally gifted, but like anything else, if you do not refine your skill, you will not progress far. Like, it's a lot of effort to succeed, either financially or just artistically, in any artistic field. Yes, 100%. Absolutely. I remember very distinctly having a conversation with a friend of mine in college. She was a history major, and I was obviously an English major. And we were talking one day, having a similar conversation, and she was just like, she's like, I'm just not good at that kind of thing. I just don't have what it takes. I'm like, well, I mean, you have a drive. If you have a drive to do these, to tell stories and whatever, like, it doesn't matter that you don't have the technical skill to do it, because it is exactly that. It's a skill. You don't just like, it's not a thing where you either have it or you don't. Like, you know, then yeah, definitely, like Matt said, there's going to be people who like sort of have an intrinsic, affinity for some things over others, but that doesn't, yeah, like, you got to refine those things. You got to hone those gifts, or else even the greatest of raw talent is not going to compare with somebody who has honed the skill, you know? So, like, yeah, absolutely, I 100% agree.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many. I mean, it's not a bit. I probably can't tell you how many. It wasn't a huge college, but like there were always, I feel like, a bunch of people who came in, like a sizable number of people that came into like the music major and stuff like that, that were like from small towns that were kind of like big fish in a little pond, and like all of a sudden they arrive at like a private college with a very competitive music program filled with a lot of people who may also have been very gifted, but also worked their fucking asses off.
I
And a lot, watching people very quickly pivot to a music minor out of that, and like no shade, but
No,
like
not at all.
that.
I see. I saw that go one of two ways. Either they did what you said, which is where they're like, "Oh shit, this world is big. I am not anywhere close to where I thought I was in this. I gotta work hard,
Was me.
right?"
Like,
Or they went the other direction, where they just became extremely jaded and cynical about it, and they just doubled down on their shittiness about it. Like, became
Yeah.
extremely
Yeah.
superior as a way of like sort of coping.
Mm-hmm.
I saw that go one of two ways every time, and it was more, luckily, like, it was more often than not the first way, but not always, and it was not pretty when it went the other way. Let me tell you.
Yeah.
no.
Seldom.
Vertiman says, speaking of singing, Vertiman says, I feel like I put a lot of myself into my singing and into my TTRPG characters. A lot of effort goes into my singing that gets boiled down to, wow, you are so talented. Oh, I see. Okay, yeah, so this is where we... Yeah. Yeah. That's really interesting. Now that I'm here, like, mentally rolling back through the characters that I know you've played. I could see that. Yeah. That's really interesting.
Has one thing that is also like I feel like with instruments that are not one's body, um which is to say any like most non-voice instruments, like there's people see you play it and there's like a physical thing that they can see happening. Like, yes,
Yeah.
with a violin you can see me bowing, and you can see, like, if I'm playing a wind instrument, you can see that I do something funky with my face and my hands are on the valves, right? With singing, like, I feel like it's especially prone to happen where, like, wow, you have such a gift, and it's like you have no idea the amount of technical shit that's going on right now with this, and everything, like from my jaw to my tongue to the way I am shaping my face right now, and also like everything, like from my, I don't know, singing it, your body is the instrument, and so singing is a whole body act.
Yeah.
And I think that's one that especially tends to, like, among music, tends to get that too.
I think this is interesting, right? Because it brings us into territory I feel like we've probably covered before on Ramblemancy, but it's always worth getting into, I think, which is that territory of, like, complimenting people on their work, right? Creative work. because I think that's an interesting case, right? For me, I used to think that I was really insecure about like what I did and what my like my writing or whatever it was, right? But actually, what eventually I came to realize that it's just that there's a particular type of compliment that's really difficult for me to accept because I know it doesn't always seem this way, but I'm often very literal brained, and so like somebody gives me a compliment with a like that includes a superlative, immediately I begin questioning it, going like, okay, but that's not literally true. I'm not the best. Like I'm not like that's
Mm-hmm.
like if it's very literal brain and it sort of ignores, and I recognize that it sort of ignores the spirit of their compliment, and I recognize that. But there is a certain kind of compliment that does bother me, and I think Verdeman sort of touched on it a little bit, which is that kind of compliment where that is more about something intrinsic in you, that it's like your own wonderfulness that allowed you to create this thing, as opposed to a compliment about the thing that you did, you know? And that
Mm-hmm.
those compliments are so hard for me to accept because I get again very literal brained about them, and when they say, "Wow, you're such a great writer," or "Wow, you're such a great drummer," I'm like, I literally am not, because I know exactly how much work I have put into it, and it's not enough to be a good, like a great whatever it is. So like I appreciate it, but at the same time, it's like I'd rather you just tell me what you liked about the thing that I did, you
Mm-hmm.
know? Because that I think takes into account the hours of work that can't, it took to create that thing, you know? Um or I mean, hell, even with something that I think that I definitely have put in the work to be great at it, like with like GMing, for example. That one I know I've put in the work, right? But it still makes
Mm-hmm.
me uncomfortable when people say things like, "Oh, you're such a great GM." I'm like, I know I'm very good at it, but like it still makes me uncomfortable because I know exactly kind of where I am. Like I know
Mm-hmm.
how good I am, but I also know that there are things that I could be doing better at all times. Like nobody ever is going to be, unless they're a complete narcissist and just totally unself-aware. Nobody ever is going to be um nobody ever is going to like GM something and not afterwards go like, "Fuck, why did I do that? I should have done this. I should
Yeah.
have, why did I forget this piece of information that was like crucial to the whole thing? That's why they didn't understand what was going on, because I forgot to explain a whole part of the,
Mm.
like you're never going to get to that point." And I'm not, and like, so it's not about, I don't know. Yeah, yeah, Little Strummer, exactly. Like I don't like when people tell me I'm a natural at something. Like I'm really not. Exactly. It took work. Like
Mm-hmm.
if you liked
Mm-hmm.
it, I so appreciate that you liked it. Like tell me that you liked it, or like what you liked about it, cuz those
Mm-hmm.
things I think to me take more into account. They acknowledge my contribution as an individual, not some like innate thing that was just gifted upon me that I had no say or agency in the create. You know what I mean? Like, and I know
Mm-hmm.
that that sounds really ungrateful, but like, it's not. It's really not. It's not coming. Like, I obviously recognize the intent behind those compliments. It's just, yeah. It's yeah. That's what I have to say about that. Was that a little bit of a rant? Maybe, but yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, certainly. Who?
Oh,
Is it
you
me
you were
or
you were speaking, so
I
go.
was thinking? Oh, I thought maybe John was. I was gonna say like I think it's at the wrong time too. You might think that that compliment means something entirely different, and that you're not doing any work. So you just are that, and that
Yeah.
you don't have to put the work in at all too. And then you then go to a place where you actually should have been putting the work in,
Mm-hmm.
and you have to put in more work, and you're not prepared whatsoever, and you're overwhelmed, and you were
Yeah.
given so many high praises that gave you a false sense, I think. But that's probably like more to do with individuals. That's not a whole thing. I think that just happened to a few people I've known, and maybe a little bit me, a little bit a while, like a long time ago with like theater stuff. But yeah, sorry, I
Absolutely.
don't know where I was quite going with that.
Well,
I was
no, I
trying
mean,
to, yeah.
you do make an excellent point, I think, because I think something that I've seen happen a lot, particularly in the town where Freeman and I live, because it is the proverbial small pond that in which big fish
That's
uh
That's
grow
why I
their
giggled when
egos. I
John
don't know.
said that.
But
Yeah.
like, but yeah, it's a thing that I've seen happen where like if you tell somebody something enough, eventually they're gonna believe it. And if you tell them that they are wonderful and that the thing that like the thing that they have created is specifically because of some innate wonderfulness, eventually they're gonna believe that, and that's a sort of thing that can become really toxic, and also prevents growth, right? Like obviously self-doubt is not a thing that is always like, questioning yourself and being down on yourself isn't healthy, but like without your ability to say to like objectively like sort of look at yourself and go, okay, well, here are things that I know that I could be doing better. You don't like, where does improvement come from? Like where do you literally can't get great at something without that,
Mhm.
and I think that's important. And like yeah.
It's so like self-criticism, and not just self-criticism but also acknowledgement of what you are good at is a critical part of getting better at something.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Acknowledging where you need to improve is, I think, just as important as acknowledging what you're good at. And if you're like, oh yes, I'm good at this thing because of some like innate thing about me, that's like, I don't need any reason to grow
Yeah, exactly.
out of
Yeah.
that, right? As opposed to
Mhm.
like looking at myself and going like, I am an okay game designer. I am a pretty good game writer. I also haven't made that much. What do I need to do? I
Right.
need to write more games, right? I need to publish more
And
games.
like,
I need to try more things.
right, and the thing
Like I
is,
can.
John, like with your specific example about like game design and writing, like you're good at it, but like nobody's first thing that they make is ever going to be incredible. So like there's always room to grow, especially
Yeah.
when you have made a thing or three things or whatever, right? Like there's always places that you can improve, and you always
Mhm.
know what those things are, right? Like if you are
Yeah.
being honest, kind of you're approaching your own work with honesty, like you're going to know.
Mm-hmm. Well, like again, taking Terminus, the one-page game, the one-page tarot game that I released this week, I wouldn't have made that if I had not made all of the other things that I have
Right,
made, and
right.
all of the other things that I have only half made. Right? I like Cobalt and Trenchcoats is great. I love it. I have sold a bunch of it. It will not be the best thing that I make. It
Yeah.
shouldn't be.
Absolutely not. If it was, then like, why are you still doing what you're doing?
Yeah, I know.
Because you love it. But like, also,
Yeah, no, I have a collaborative, like a collaboration on a tarot game, and like I have, I think, two or three other tarot games that I have that I have like started writing and that are in various stages of completion. But like, had I not done those, and then had I not exposed myself to other people's work actively, because I was like, you know what, I feel like I need to wrap my head a little bit more around what makes a game that incorporates the tarot a good game, and what is a respectful usage of this tool as opposed to just like a French deck of cards.
yeah.
I don't make Terminus unless I've chosen to do that, unless I've looked at myself and gone, yeah, I should probably learn a little bit here, or I could learn something here.
Yeah.
you know
I saw.
and
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
yeah, just like trying things, and also acknowledging that I do have room to grow in like
Mhm.
this specific area.
Yeah. I saw Littlest Drummer, and this is an excellent point. Um, I get it mostly with parenting. Yes, I have good parenting moments, but it takes work. I've done so much research and I talk to professionals, and I had really great parents growing up. But I get frustrated and I make mistakes, and sometimes I don't do a good job. I'm not a natural, I just learn. Yes. Incredible example. Like, that's exactly, yeah. Probably one of the more important places to be open to doing that, to be like able to be honest about
Mhm.
how you're doing, Like, because it specifically and profoundly affects another person. So like one of the most important places I think a person can have that attitude.
Mhm.
Um, an excellent example.
Mhm.
And Geek Out said Akira Kurosawa, arguably one of the greatest directors, said movie directors, or should I say people who create things, are very greedy and they can never be satisfied. That's why they keep on working. I've been able to work for so long because I think next time I'll make something good. That's yeah, that's and honestly, here's the reality. Like I saw Matt, and I very much appreciate it. You said that I'm a great GM, and I appreciate that. But the way that I got there the way that I got there, and this isn't like me like this is exactly true. This is exactly how it happened, because I didn't have, unlike a lot of people I think who get into the hobby, I didn't have a GM coming in that I like looked up to and tried to emulate. I didn't have that. I was the person who like picked up the game and was like, I like this and I want to do this, so I guess I'm running the game, right? Like that was me. So I didn't have somebody to emulate until much later, until I was already way into it, and then streaming happened, right? So all I had was an idea in my head of what I wanted to accomplish in a game, and then an idea of how to do that, and I would try it, and then I tried it, and then maybe it didn't work. It probably didn't work, and and then I would go, okay, after the game I'd think about it for a while. I'm like, okay, why didn't that work? What could I do to make it work? And then I just built on that. And I'm like, okay, let me try this thing instead. And then maybe that wouldn't work either. Maybe I'd do several different iterations of that. And finally I'd come up with one that like, oh, that worked. Now let me see if I can do it again. And then and it would work again. And I go, hell yeah, okay, that's now part of my GMing style. And that's how I got here, right? Like that's how I got here. I didn't just one day wake up and was like, I'm going to do a thing, and then just was excellent at it. Like that's not like, and the thing is, I'm still doing that. Like talk to John, talk to Freeman, because they hear me, because I process verbally. So like I have to do that with another person, and it's usually John or Freeman. So like they know, they have heard me literally go through the like, I did this and it didn't really work out. So like how could I make this work how could I do this in a different way? How can I change this about what I do to better accomplish what I want it to do? So that is literally what made me. That is how I got here. It wasn't until much later, right, when streaming TTRPGs became a thing, where I actually had people that I could emulate and go, ooh, I like what so and so did. I'm gonna try that. I'm gonna try to incorporate that into my style because I like that. But that came much later, after I had already built this for myself, like built my own thing. So yeah, like absolutely being open to that kind of change, being honest with yourself about, what you are doing and producing, in my opinion, is the only way to grow. That's the only way to actually achieve greatness in anything, I think. You have to first sort of really look at what you do and absolutely accept compliments because you probably fucking deserve them. But also don't take them as the be all end all, right? Like, don't hang your hat on them either positively or negatively. Like that's, you just got to be honest about what you're making.
Yeah. And I think really the theme of like this conversation is healthy self-criticism, right? Healthy self-examination. Yeah. Right? There is a degree of self-criticism that is healthy, that is looking at, and when I say criticism, I feel like that's a word that has negative connotations, but right. it needn't necessarily be negative, right? Being critical of something just means to examine it closely, right? And you can look and reflect on things that you do well and things that you need to improve on when you are being critical. It's just that, people most often tend to focus on those negative aspects. So like, be critical of yourself, of both the things you do well and the things that you could improve on. And that is a solid way to grow in anything that you do, right? It doesn't like, obviously, all of us here do creative things and we're content creators. And so creativity is something that is on our minds a lot because it's what we do. But that can apply to anything. It can apply to any skill or anything that you want to learn to do or to be better at. Like we've talked about parenting tonight. It could be something that you do at your job or like a hobby or whatever the myriad skills that make up our lives and our aspects of our personalities.
Yeah. Little Strummer, thank you so much. That does mean a lot to me. And I am happy to be running games for people who like appreciate and recognize that, which they do to me frequently, which is great. And I really, really am happy to have that. And so yeah, thanks. I appreciate that. Um, Geekout says, in my opinion, greatness comes from the obvious, like skill, talent, etc. But more than anything, it's confidence in your skills and knowing that there are others that are/were better, and that there is always ways to improve and learn. The difference between novices and experts is that experts keep studying. My favorite quote about martial arts: a master was awarding black belts, and this very old master noticed a student was feeling very prideful and said, "All this belt means is that you are a good student." We learn more from our mistakes and losses than our wins, successes. Yeah, so that's exactly, yeah, and I think that's really, really cool and interesting. And I think that, yeah, there are. The thing is, when you get good enough at something, it's because you know enough to know what you don't know, which is sort of essentially what Matt's saying here. You know enough to know what you don't know, and I think that's, yeah, that's a big deal. I think that's a really important step in anybody's growth in anything.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's actually something that my dad would always like started saying to me, like as he had gotten old, and as I had gotten old enough to like understand what the fuck he was talking about. Where he would say, like as I've gotten older, he says he's like, as I've gotten older, it just makes me realize how much I don't actually know. And like, you would be hard pressed. He would disagree, but you would be hard pressed to find somebody who's done more shit than my dad. Like, he would disagree, but that's that's because he's looking at it from his perspective. Somebody who's done all of those things.
Right.
Yeah, and like when you're, like I said earlier, when you're in it, it's really easy to. And this is one of the things that makes me very appreciative for, and y'all can tick up the counter. But it makes me very appreciative of having a family of educators growing up, and then also like having studied education, because one of the like key components of being a teacher is that you have to look at something that and break it down into all of its essential components. Though all of the little procedures and assumptions that you have built up into this skill that you have, you must now teach other people those things that are as simple as breathing to you.
It's not just about, so when you're a teacher, it's not just about thinking about the thing that you are teaching. It's also thinking about it. Like,
yeah, metacognition is incredibly important as an educator, or just anytime you a person, like you're not as a teacher, anytime you want to teach something to someone, you have to understand that the assumptions that you have, just the foundational pieces of knowledge that you have about it, somebody else might not have. Because basically anything we do is a skill that we can cultivate. And it is the result of a number of experiences and stimuli and a certain amount of, innate, observation or experience or whatever that we bring to the table that or some people just click better with certain things, but like you have to like figure out what's the core of this, and what are the things that I just assume to be true, or that I just know to be true, that I have to like figure out. Like going through and figuring out those things is a fascinating process. Like I think the best example that I have is I was going to explain something about music, and I mentioned like a scale and a key or something like that, and someone was like, whoa, back up, what are those things? And I was like, right, okay.
It's like, okay, hold on, explain this to me like I'm 5, and then you do, and they're like, okay, maybe explain it to me like I'm 3.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe. I need you to take me back to preschool music class.
Yeah. That's me with like yeah, I am sort of musical. I have that like innate talent, but like you start talking about scales and like the like all this sort of shit, and I'm like, I need you to go way back. just
way back, please.
Like go back to like 101, and then go even further than that.
Yeah.
And then explain it to me.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's the best example that I can give about that, because there's like, again, music is one of those things that that a lot of people I think look at as a very like mystical thing. And it's like, no, it's something that you can learn by
Literally math.
ear. Like
Literally, it's
literally,
math.
it's literally music theory is just math. Like it's just funky looking math. Like that's all it is.
It's math that
Um,
sounds cool.
yeah, truly, just in the same way that baking is math that tastes good.
Exactly. Freeman's like.
I think I broke Freeman a little bit with that one. Listen, baking
No,
is
don't, no.
baking
No.
baking is math class. Cooking is physics class.
You're not wrong.
Yeah.
Like math class is so pristine, and then you go over to your physics class and your physics teacher is like, I'm gonna take everything they told you and it's gonna be like the fucking like that's like, yeah, like pristine boxing, like a boxing match with very rigid like rules and shit like that. This over here is like a fucking street fight in the alley. Like,
I mean, baking is chemistry, but like also chemistry is math.
chemistry also math-ish, math adjacent. Forgive me for my metaphor
Like,
here.
look, I didn't do well in chemistry, but even I understand that in chemistry I was like balancing equations. That's math.
Mhm.
That's math. You're balancing chemical formulas. That's math.
I failed chemistry twice. I know everyone's gonna revoke my liberal arts major card here, or my queer card, whichever one. But I did pretty good at math and science in high
Yeah.
school, actually.
I didn't do
Like,
good at the classes, but I was good at conceptually understanding them, and it turns out that the reason I didn't do well at the classes was because I have ADHD and I didn't know at the time.
yeah, that
and
does tend to contribute.
it sure does, because it would confuse the fuck out of my math teacher in high school when everything was correct. Like all of my work, the processes were like, and then I'd somehow end up with the wrong answer.
Mhm. Yeah.
God, I feel that. I feel that in my soul.
Yeah.
Like, that's how I would wind up with like a solid B in math, because I would
Yeah.
it would be one or the other. I would do everything wrong and get the right answer because I conceptually understood what was happening, and I would do the
Yeah.
whole equation, and be
Or
like, no, it's this.
Right, because either way, for me at least, whichever, it was the same for me. It was one or the other, and either way, it was for the same reason. I understood it and I wrote it down incorrectly.
Mhm.
Like there was something between here and here that was just like not communicating, like something not happening.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm gonna say that I had a few bumps along the way with math teachers. I'll say that much. I eventually had to take math all over again
Hmm.
at the community college here, which is fine because then I landed the best math teacher ever, and I
Yeah.
got it. It was fine. I didn't go all the way into the advanced. I didn't do it. I didn't want to. Don't need to.
Oh, no, like trust
But
me, you
I
and I
got.
had a lot of the same math teachers, and it wasn't until I
Oh,
went to a different
yeah.
school
Mhm. No,
that I
those are
started
those are the
understanding
ones.
math.
Those are the ones I'm talking
Yeah.
about, and some also from before then too. It's just
Yeah.
like no.
Yeah, absolutely. So
Nah, that it's a big, that's a really the teacher is a big part of it. Okay, so
yeah, for sure. Yeah, Maggie, that's exactly what I did. It was either like flipping around numbers somewhere in the equation or flipping around the
Yeah.
like plus and minus signs.
Mhm.
Like where like I'd like and have like a negative number somewhere that was not supposed to be a negative number. I just wrote it down with a negative, but still somehow got the right answer because I just wrote the wrong thing, but ended up with the right answer.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, it was. Yep. So
The math teacher looking at assignments, like ADHD kids assignments, just like, I don't know what everything else on this page is, but you got to the right answer. So
oh, listen, I got through my math class on partial credit because in high school, like that's how I got through all of algebra 2, all of pre-calculus
Mhm. Yeah.
was through partial credit. Because like they could tell I knew what was going on. I just was writing the wrong things.
yeah, like I have my brain works so weird for math because
Mhm.
like once if I could figure out essentially how to break what I was doing down into a few essential components that were more simple than whatever complex shit was happening, then like that was the tipping point for me. And I would wind up using my calculator almost not at all, except for like the very weird like pieces of bizarre like multiplication or addition or division that I had to do. Because like part of me also knew that in most cases, if I'm getting a really like if I'm going to do a bunch of shit on my calculator and getting a bunch of really gnarly numbers, I've done something wrong. You know, I need to back up and start over.
Mm.
But I had a friend who most of his effort in calculus and pre-calculus was spent like teaching his calculator to do all of the homework for like I would be sitting there doing the homework and he would be sitting there teaching his calculator to do the homework for him, and we both completed our homework at roughly the same rates, but I would look over at him like 20 minutes into work time having done none of his shit. That was just like, my guy. I'm gonna have this done before the bell rings, and then I'm gonna just dick around and play like Pac-Man on my calculator for the rest of class, and you're still gonna be working on the calculator program.
Yeah. Well, it's it's a funny anecdote which I think many people have either heard already or will appreciate. Um, is
Mhm.
so like in the ADHD like assessment stuff, there's part of it that like assesses sort of where your cognitive strengths are. Um, and at least the one I took, I'm assume they're standardized, but again, I've only taken it for me in one place from one institution. Anyway, the point is, there's a place that sort of assesses your cognitive strengths, um, because oftentimes those are correlated to like whatever sort of like cognitive disorders or misalignments you might be having, right? And so in mine, I tested below average in creative thinking. I tested far above average in mathematical reasoning, and I just think that that's extremely funny if you know
Yeah.
literally anything about me.
All of my well, that happened to me too on a bunch of standardized tests, and like
Mhm.
the career placement shit is that they'd be like, you should go be
Mm.
an engineer or like an architect or like something really mathy, and I would be like, no. I job
Like,
shadowed an
counter
architect for
argument. What if I didn't?
like I job shadowed my dad. Like I already knew well what my dad did because I was around DOT lab like labs a whole bunch as a child, because my dad like my I wouldn't be able to go to the babysitter and my mom would be teaching school, and so my dad would take a long lunch, come pick me up, and I would just sit in the fucking like testing lab with him for an afternoon. So I knew what he did.
Mm-hmm.
But I job shadowed him anyways, as part of like a high school thing. But like I job shadowed an architect as part of like another project where you had to like decide on a like hypothetically decide on a career and a path to it, like sophomore year of high school or some shit. And I was in that building for like 3 hours, and within like 45 minutes I was like, absolutely not, I do not want to do this.
Yeah.
Like, please God, no, this feels sterile and soul crushing.
Yeah.
That's why I have a weird little goblin in a beanie on the internet for a living.
There you go. It's a dream. Uh, being an internet goblin. I don't know how you would exactly put that on a resume, but I highly recommend you do it like exactly like that. Just internet
Yeah.
goblin and then like list year. I definitely once held a position that like the official position title was infomancer.
Mm,
Um, I
That's cool.
got to
Yeah.
name the position, so um,
that scans.
I got to name the position. Also, it's funny because even after I left that job, the next people who took up that position were also called infomancers. So, haha, another in a long list of things that I had a lasting impact on that I was also not part of, and nobody will remember my contribution to it.
That's the resume entry there in chat.
I think that's yeah, hired, like
Boom, got him.
You're in.
Get that man a company beanie.
No, this is sort of semi unrelated, but on the subject of things that I contributed to but didn't. This is maybe a piece of Lucas lore that like is maybe unknown to a lot of people. But in college, I almost joined, but did help found a fraternity.
That's right.
I was telling this to my friend the other day who was in a sorority, and she just looked at me and she was like, "What?" I was like, listen. So yeah, no, I was in not a good place and was not making good choices, and some people got me in a group because they wanted to bring back a fraternity that had sort of fizzled out some year, like decades ago. And other doc, hi, hello, it's so good to see you here. We're talking about a little bit of everything tonight, so welcome on in. Um, but yeah, no, I there was a there's a group of people who were trying to like refound like revive an old fraternity, and I was in there. I signed the charter, but then over the summer I sort of came to my senses, not about the fraternity, just sort of in general. Like I said, I was not in a good place and not really making a lot of good decisions. Um and I was like, maybe I actually don't want to do that. And so I didn't. But some of my contributions were kept in there, some of my suggestions, because I suggested, because their symbol was a wolf. And so like I suggested that like when pledges were accepted, right? Like when they were finally like got through like the pledge week and they got accepted, they would all gather, and as sort of their like as part of their like ceremony, they would all howl, right? That's a thing, and they do that. They did take that suggestion. They went with that.
Fucking rat.
So that's a way I contributed to something, and that my name will never be attached to. And honestly, I'm fine with it.
Amazing.
Yeah, other doc, it has been a minute. It's so good to see you here. It's kind of been a minute for us too. Actually, this is only our second stream back from taking a long, needed break. So yeah, we're kind of, and it's also like our second to last stream before we take another short break. Although that one's not because of needs in terms of rest or anything, more just out of logistical inability to physically be in front of the camera during that time.
Yeah.
But so we're kind of mostly just sort of spending these Ramblemancies not talking about anything in particular, just kind of like hanging out, talking about whatever comes to mind. So it's awesome to have you. It's so good to see you here.
Talking about creativity a whole lot tonight.
Yes.
Making stuff, which is a topic that is near and dear to absolutely none of us.
No, none of us care about that.
Creators. Mm-hmm. It's really just been kind of a lot of inane, non-conversation.
Yeah, I was talking about joining a fraternity, so.
I do appreciate Verdiman talking about those like placement tests and stuff. So I knew those tests were always hilarious for me because I knew from a young age that I wanted to be a singer. So I just took note of all the questions that were related to performing arts, and the ones that were not a part of performance, and just naturally skewed my tests. That's the way to do it.
Maggie, what were the letters? Oh, it was the tri-O's. It was Omega, Omega, Omega.
Ooh.
Yep. Yeah, the hardest villain to defeat in gaming is scheduling. Absolutely. Whew. Honestly, I'm so lucky with my home game that people's schedules just like lined up. Truly, I don't like in
the fact that y'all play like clockwork on Mondays is like, I mean, not necessarily the same exact hour every single, but
right.
On Mondays.
Yep.
On Mondays, like clockwork. It is so impressive to me.
Absolutely. I think a little bit not streaming sort of takes the pressure off a little bit, which kind of like sort of counterintuitively makes it a little easier to hold the schedule,
Yeah.
Because we don't. Yeah. I think on some level, the pressure of needing to keep a schedule for streaming, on some level, kind of makes it harder in some ways to keep the schedule. I don't know. It's weird.
Because I think it's because the time is inflexible. You have to plan. Like you can't be as loose with the other things that go around it. So if something is going to cut like an hour into when you would be streaming, then that suddenly means you do have to make a choice between the two. Whereas if it's just a home game, you can be like, hey, can we push back by an hour and a half?
Or you can just be like, hey guys, I'm gonna be late tonight. Like, I'm
Yeah.
gonna be there like an hour
Yeah.
into the game. Like that's in a home game it's a little easier to do that.
A lot of folks love planning ahead, and some folks really love just living in the moment too. There's also that, I think I've seen that happen.
Yeah, that's true. That's
all
also
across
true.
all across everything, really, not just TTRPGs. There's just folks who are like, ooh, but I just live in the moment, and I can't.
I like to say that I sort of am one of those live in the moment people, but I sort of do need it. I need a plan to guide me. Whether or not I stick to that plan is a whole different subject. But I think I need a. What's that quote? That famous quote?
Well,
plans are worthless. Planning is everything.
Yes.
I haven't heard that.
Plans are worthless.
Like
planning
that.
is everything.
Yeah.
Well, when you're doing a structured thing, you kind of need it too, though.
Mm-hmm.
Like when you're doing a project that's for a lot of people to see.
Yeah. I mean, the farther into both content creation and game design that I've gotten, the more clear it is to me that planning is useful to a certain point. It is necessary to a certain point, but over planning is just as harmful as under planning. And so shooting right down the middle is kind of the way to go, I've found, and so as much as I'm I don't know what I'm doing 4 hours from now sometimes, but then again, I will also have spent an hour of my day planning what I will be doing for Gen Con 2023, which is 350 days from now. So it's a weird dichotomy where I'm wild to me to think about projects that will pan out in 2024 here in mid-late 2022, but that is my life sometimes.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because I think kind of going back to GMing, I sort of do a similar thing. Part of my I always say, because it's easier than explaining the truth of it, that I'm a pants GM. I think that is mostly true. It's not entirely true. I still do planning in the way that I think I can be a pants GM because I spend so much time thinking about the game ahead of time.
I think that's having played games with you and having also been a sounding board for a lot of your games behind the scenes. I think that's a fair assessment.
Yeah, I think so. It's not that I necessarily feel like I need to plan, because I don't. Actually, what has happened and sort of my growth as a GM has been learning when I need to plan and when I don't, and learning how to recognize the signs in that. And for me, one of the places where there's a particular, I don't even know if I'll be able to describe it, but there's a particular mindset that I get into when I'm trying to plan something, where it's I can't even hold a thought. I can for literally anything else, but if I'm trying to plan the game and I cannot even hold a single thread of a thought in my mind long enough to build on it, that's when I go, okay, I'm just not going to bother planning. We're going to get into the game tonight and things will happen, and I will just have to trust that things will happen. And I think I haven't spent a lot of time examining why that, when I feel that particular way about a session, those tend to be those sessions I don't need to plan for. But if I had to guess, if I had to speculate right now, I think it's because an attempt to plan in those sessions it's a session that doesn't require planning. And so attempting to plan anyway doesn't yield a whole lot of positive results, because I'm just I literally don't even know what to even focus on in planning, because there's just nothing to plan. It's going to play out however it plays out. And I think part of my growth in GMing has been learning how not to force myself to plan in those instances. So, because that ends up being sort of rapidly diminishing returns in those instances.
Other docs, yeah, there's a lot of value when you're planning and just setting up simple prompts for you to improv
Absolutely.
later.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's usually those sessions where I know that probably there's going to be a lot more, it's going to be a role-playing heavy session, right? When I know ahead of time that I don't have encounters planned or things like that, because they just don't, there's no place where they could come in. And so then I'm thinking about planning, and so I'm thinking about planning what does this NPC that they're going to talk to want? What is this NPC that they're going to talk to going to say? And all this sort of stuff. And it's usually those sessions where I'm just you know what? I don't need to be doing this. They're going to talk, and I'll react to whatever the players say. and that's just gonna have to be how the session goes. So yeah, I think just a certain amount of it has been like recognizing when I do actually need to spend the time and effort to plan, and when I don't really need to, and when it's actually a hindrance if I try to plan more.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, I don't know if I had an actual point about that. I think it was just sort of an general observations. But yeah,
Yeah,
Good
and
old Ramblin.
we've talked many as the time about the point in every GM's life where like they go from like, and some GMs never like
yeah, sometimes it's
advance
super
past
helpful.
this. Like sometimes it is super helpful, and sometimes this is just like the particular style of GMing that fits best for you. You know, so I don't want to say that there's one way to do it, but I find a lot of GMs wind up going from the I have 18 pages of notes and I've written out character introductions and descriptions and descriptions of places.
I have like skill check DCs here. I have, like
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think like I think that is a step of Amethyst
absolutely.
Cat Lady. Hello.
Hi, Amethyst. I hope you're feeling okay.
Yeah, me too. I hope you're feeling all right. That's a step that I think like that kind of every GM does wind up at some point.
Yeah.
In
Especially
doing
early
that.
on, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's comforting to have that safety net of ready to go things. So if somebody asks you a question, you can be like, boom, I got this right here.
Yeah, like I have an objective answer, it's written down and it's right there. I'm prepared.
Yeah. Or like you have those scaffolds to set the
Honestly, I still find that really helpful and useful. Like I'm running from a module right now for the first time ever. Obviously, I'm sort of taking it and making it my own, but like I'm running from a module, and it's still extremely helpful when a player asks me a question and I have an objective answer that I can just like, oh yes, right here, there's an answer to that question right there. I can find it for you and tell you. I've just at a point where I don't like making those things. I don't like making that stuff. But yeah,
especially for D&D, I don't like doing that much. I don't like doing that much
No.
work, but I like having it. You know,
absolutely, yes.
When I was running, I think this is Descent into Avernus right here. Oh, it was so good. I like having Descent into Avernus. No, wait, actually, it's this one.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. That like that safety net is really nice, and like also just like being able to like, all right, we want to go to this place. I flip the page, and right there in the layout there is a punched out section with italicized text that says read this to your players, and it's a nice piece of evocative, like short to the point evocative description.
Yeah.
Or like a thing that an NPC says as they introduce themselves, or as part of, like if this character is still with the party, they will react this way, and here's what they might say. Like having just like those things sprinkled out throughout there, so that you get like those little moments of like, yeah, this is who this character is, or yeah, this is what this important place to the party looks like. It is super helpful. I just don't like doing that on myself anymore.
And this is, I think, one of the things, I think you started to talk about this, but like one of the things I realized pretty early on, well, not super early on, but at least like a year into my home game, not the one I'm currently running, but previous one, was I was doing all this planning. But the thing about planning is that eventually you do enough planning that you can just sort of ride it out. And if you continue to try to plan, you're going to find that there's not actually that much for you to do anymore. Because now you're just waiting for things to play out. The things that you planned to play out. And that's what happened to me. I don't know if that's necessarily a universal experience, but at least that's what happened in my sort of growth, which was that I realized at a certain point, I thought I was getting worse at DMing. That's the worst. I thought I was getting worse at it because I was like, man, I used to be so good. I used to be so like planning out things and writing out these things, and I'd have like, little bits of flavor text ready. I'd have like DCs prepared and all this sort of stuff. And now I can't even be bothered to come up with an NPC description. I'm getting worse. I'm getting lazier, and it's like, that's not really what's happening. What's happening is that I had reached a point where all of my planning, I mean, yeah, I did it. I did the planning. Now I'm just waiting for the plans to pay off, because as it turns out, TTRPGs are a cooperative experience, and that means that by necessity, as the GM, you end up being in the role of somebody who's reacting to things, not someone who is you don't have to be active all the time. Sometimes the fruits of your labor are you get to sit there and watch shit happen.
Yeah, exactly.
My favorite.
Watch it all unfold.
My favorite parts of running, like Wanderhome is a game that can very easily be run GMless, but especially when players are new, they like to have the comfort, like the safety net of a facilitator there. But it was so nice to have spent like, it's a 2-hour gaming session at those con games, and so like it was nice. Like, yeah, we spent like 40 minutes on introducing ourselves personally to each other, and then also making characters, and then like an hour and 20 minutes, an hour and a half maybe of gameplay. But having done all of that, because character creation is the bulk of like the mechanics of Wanderhome, and the rest of it is like there's one mechanic, and it's like token exchange, like no dice, no masters, token exchange. It's just a flimsy excuse to push the narrative in certain directions occasionally. So it was really nice, having like essentially done like that little bit of planning and like, very meticulous kind of, okay, so you're doing this, how does that affect you, like going through that process, and then like, an hour into the session, I can just sit there like this, smiling and watching my badger moth tender and my like one of the other characters at the table sit there and role play this beautiful little scene with a group of small and forgotten gods that they decided that they happened upon, and then they looked over at me at one point, they're like, can we do that? And I'm like, yeah, what do you need me for? You objectively don't, actually, but
yeah.
There's a new title for Lucas based on the intro to this episode, The Sheriff.
Wait, what intro to this episode? Wait, what are we talking about?
Matt has made a clip edit, and it is in the gallery, and
I haven't watched it because right now I'm streaming my desktop audio, and that would come through. So I'll watch it after.
The desktop audio is us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was I gonna say? Oh, so also Amethyst, thanks for stopping by. I hope the rest of your night goes well. Keep us updated.
I hope you get to go home soon.
Yeah. What was I gonna say? Oh, so I have this actually brought up an interesting topic, because I mentioned about like reacting, right, as the GM, and this brought me to something I was thinking about. Was it yesterday? Time has no meaning.
True.
Recently, within the last 1 to 2 days, something that I was thinking about, which is honestly, this could be a Ramblemancy topic in and of itself, but like the idea of like emotional storytelling in TTRPGs, right? Emotional scenes, emotional storytelling. I was thinking about this, and I was thinking, because I'm not always able to hit those scenes exactly right, like at least not in a way that feels like satisfying to me when I'm GMing, and so it got me thinking, like, why is that? Like, what are the components of that? And I realized what the and this should, I'm going to say this, and it's honestly I think it's going to sound really obvious when I say it, but to me it took a lot longer for me to get there, and that is that in an emotional scene, like as a GM, like typically the way that plays out is you like sort of pitch something to the players, like pitch an emotionally charged situation. Something just fell onto my hand, and I knocked it into my water, and I don't know what it was, but I'm gonna not drink that anymore. Uncomfortable. Oh, it didn't fall into my water. I found it right here. I don't know what this is, but anyway, very sorry. Let's get back to the topic that I was talking about. So, you like typically the way that scene plays out, right, is you pitch an emotionally charged situation to a player character, right, and then they sort of have to react to it, and this is where the key comes in. This is where I was not making the kind of like connection, and I really should have been, which is that an emotional scene in a TTRPG can only go as far and as deep as the player is willing to follow you. Like, you as the GM, yes, absolutely, you instigate. Probably. Not always. But let's just, taking the assumption of a GM-instigated emotional scene, right? You as the GM are instigating this. You're sort of you know, to use the like the baseball metaphor, you are pitching, right? The player is hitting. But the thing is, if the player is bunting, you cannot then act as if they've hit a home run, right? Like you can only react to what they give you back, right? And I'm not saying this is like a criticism on players. It's just a matter of like you're only going to be able to follow the scene is only going to be able to go as deep as the player is willing to follow you, right? Is willing to take it. Because and I'm not saying that's even a choice, right? Because if you try to force the scene to be a sort of deeper, more emotional thing than the player was willing to sort of respond to, then it's going to end up feeling at best hollow and unearned and just deeply unsatisfying. At worst, well, we've all heard the horror stories, so we don't need to talk about that. We've all heard the TTRPG horror stories, and we don't need to get into that topic. So, but like at best, it's going to feel hollow and unearned if you try to treat that. So like really you as the GM, it's a sort of an awkward position that you're in, playing both the instigator and a reactor, right? Like you are like instigating the scene, but then also by doing so putting yourself in the position to be beholden to reacting to what the player is going to give you. And this was sort of like it sounds really obvious, I think, saying it out loud now, but in the moment it was like that's the connection. It's not something that like I just can't hit the scene every time. It's that I need to be able to recognize when the player is just bunting and when they are like, you know, trying to hit home runs. You know what I'm saying? Like it's So yeah, exactly, Matt. The energy you get back is what you have to go off of. Absolutely, exactly. And me, I already operate that way as a GM on the table. At the table, like I sort of feed off the energy my players give back to me. So like you put something in, you feed it back to me, and I'll feed it back to you, right? And like that's kind of how like so I know that there are some people that I think everybody does that to some extent or another, but like we are social creatures. That is sort of how we operate. But I think there are some people who are able to kind of push past that and just sort of, you know, be able to be on regardless of like what they're getting back. And I think it's probably harder to do that, but there are people who can do it. I don't think I'm one of them. I think I am sort of stuck, and that's not a bad thing, right? Because in that way, it's not necessarily a bad thing. I say stuck, and that makes it sound negative. It's not. I think that's a good thing in a lot of ways, because what it means is that you're like, for me, I know that I'm always going to be sort of operating at the level that my players are operating at, you know, which I think is a good thing. Like you want to have that sort of synergy, but
yeah.
Again, this was another thing that I don't think I had a specific point about. It was just like some musings and sort of like a like aha moment that I had the other day, and I just figured I'd share it. But yeah,
I mean, we started this episode off with sort of an indulgent aha moment that I had about my own work and the themes therein. So, you know, what is Ramblemancy occasionally, if not a platform for us and our audience both to just share our collective aha moments?
there it is, right here. Basically improv, and if your partner is not engaging with you, even as the straight role, not the orientation, your partner has to be in it with you. Yeah, exactly.
It's that was the point I was going to make. It's very improv.
Yeah, and like if you're doing improv and you're not getting much back from the person that you're like sort of playing opposite of, like you're going to be pretty limited in what you can do with this, where you can take the scene. And I think that's equally true in TTRPGs, probably because they are frankly both improv. You're doing the same thing. You're just you're doing it's the same. You're doing the same thing.
I often wonder, like, who amongst I'm sure I'm probably certain there's got to be many who do this, but I wonder who amongst the TTRPG community, before they do like anything live, I wonder how many like indulge themselves with improv games, because basically improv is just a series of exercises, and then some of those exercises are performed on stage with audience giving suggestions to the players of what the scene's going to be, and then you give the audience that scene as it may be. So I often wonder like how many folks start like off camera with the mics cold do warm-ups.
That's interesting. I've never actually thought about doing that as like a warm up for streams, but I think that's a really interesting idea. I know that it's a common piece of advice that's given to people who are first starting out, like particularly GMs.
Hmm.
Um, but that's a common piece of advice that's given out, but I don't know how many people actually like go and follow through on that. Mostly because
Yeah.
like I don't know that everybody necessarily knows all the time where they can go find improv classes or whatever, like in like local to them.
True. That's true. Yeah.
But yeah, no, like as a warm up for streams, that's really interesting.
Hmm.
I've never thought about that. That's really interesting concept.
It is interesting. I forget the name of the exercise or game, whatever you'd like to call it. It's both in my mind. It's fun and it's an exercise. It's counting numbers,
Hmm.
I believe. The more people, the more fun, I think, and the more challenging. And you have to get to a certain number. I think it's like 20 or 30. I can't remember. It's a higher up number. And you'll have to everyone has to get to that number, count that number out loud, and anyone who says the same number at the same time means you all have to start at the very beginning, basically. So
Hmm.
like I would say one, and then if you went next, Lucas, and you said two, and then John said two, we'd have to start over. You have to like synchronize, and it's
Right.
about getting in a weird way that I'm not sure I completely believe, but I do
That
sort of. It kind of gets you all connected in a way where you're then not talking over each other later on. You're like synchronized in a way.
that feels like it would be so much harder to do like this, right? Remotely.
Actually,
Mm.
that's exactly why that game was suggested for remotely,
Oh,
for
interesting.
remote stuff, is because it's a whole different environment and it's hard to like read body language fully
Yeah.
entirely. And sometimes you don't have a camera, so it's even harder. But with the camera, at least you have something, but you don't have the full picture. And so it's an exercise to kind of like get into that groove with
Huh.
the group of people in the camera. And I've often thought of that, but yeah.
Interesting. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's definitely something to think about.
Because
Like,
a lot of improv folks have had to switch over to
yeah.
camera, I believe, for a little bit, and then someone came up with that idea and was like, "Hey, counting numbers." I believe that's what it's called, at least. Yeah,
Wow.
it is interesting. I think it'd be a fun little experiment to try.
Yeah. That'd be really interesting. Maybe we should try that in our home game and see how it goes in our home D&D game.
Yeah, actually,
Yeah.
I did think of that once. Yeah.
Yeah. That'd be really interesting. Huh.
There's a good number of folks in that home game too. That's a good
Yeah,
number
yeah.
because it's a little bit challenging, right? Yeah.
We've got
You
well,
want it to be kind of
not so much
challenging.
now because we've got like a guest left,
Fair.
and our guest left, and we have one player still out. So like that's what, 5 players?
That's true.
Yeah, you have
I
five.
mean,
five.
five
Oh, so
is
that's
okay.
yeah. I mean that's
Yeah.
5, 6 including the GM. But like that's
Five is
yeah,
good.
that's a good number. Yeah.
It is.
Huh. Interesting.
Mm-hmm. There's a few other games too, but that's the one that I harken back to the easiest because that's the one I've played a lot in person, and I read that online too. It's like, oh, that would be a good game to play online.
That's cool. That's cool. Yeah. Well, isn't that cool?
Y'all talking about body language also just got me thinking a little bit about like the con games of Wanderhelm I ran. And like I remember, I know I've said before, probably live on this channel in this very spot, like how I thought that I would struggle to run con games. And I think the fact that I was running I think I would struggle to run D&D.
Yeah.
But Wanderhelm is a very, very simple storytelling system. And so I think that lent an advantage. But I think there is also something to the fact that running con games like that, you've got the people who have paid to show up to the game, you've got a bunch of buy-in already,
Mhm.
and they all like TTRPGs and are there to play them.
Yeah.
And so I think that is something that I hadn't really thought about until I did that. But also just thinking about it in terms of that too, I think I would still struggle maybe to run them in like this kind of meaning to run like online games with a group like on a short turnaround with very little to go off of at the beginning online, because like I think there was a lot of like, you know, I hadn't played games with the exception of my roommates who are all new players. since the beginning of the pandemic, I hadn't played in person with like anybody at all, or groups like this. And so going into Gen Con, I was like, oh shit, I forgot how much body language factored into like playing off of other people. This is wild.
Mhm.
Yeah, no, it's yeah, absolutely.
Wow, there's a lot of sound happening outside right now. I just suddenly got distracted by a very loud.
I know. I just heard.
Those are some pipes. That's all I'll say.
Yeah. Man. Wild. Well, we are sort of at the end of our stream here. This one went by really fast.
Yeah, I looked down and it was
Yeah.
like 9:35
Yeah.
here, and then I looked down again and it was 10:25, and I was like, "Whoa, where did the time go?"
Yeah. Honestly, this one I see. I have the stream cat
Mm-hmm.
timer on right now, so like I've been looking at it the whole time, but like it still didn't feel like, even though I was literally watching the time go by, I didn't feel like that time was going by. um
Yeah,
This time is a weird soup.
Time is a weird, I think we discussed this in voice chat the other night. Time is a weird lethal soup.
Interesting.
It is incredibly lethal.
Yeah. Nobody who deals with it gets that. I'm gonna stop. We are gonna go. Gonna go, everybody.
Withering effects of entropy. Like, hold on, we've doubled back to the beginning of the stream where I said we can't get too wildly self-indulgent on the "we are all specks of dust upon specks of dust within a speck of dust."
Anyway, Rule of Lore is here with our existential bullshit. No, we have some end of stream announcements. But my brain isn't working anymore, so somebody else should probably handle those while I type things in the chat.
We here at Rule of Lore, as we mentioned at the beginning, are kind of in a little bit of a phase where we are taking everything apart and then stapling it back together in a more pleasing fashion. So we're going to be a little light on things for the next few months. We'll have Ramblemancy mostly, a few small breaks here and there while we take some time to take care of some personal and professional commitments and stuff like that. And then hopefully by the end of all of that, we have a streamlined version of what it is that we do here at the channel. We do have some exciting content coming up to you, hopefully in spooky season this October. You'll hear more about that as it gets closer and as we've got it ready to fire. But that's kind of all of the content related announcements that we have. If you would like to support what it is that we here if you would like to support what it is that we do here at Rule of Lore, there are a variety of ways that you can do that. The simplest one is to follow us on all of our social media and join the Discord. You can keep up to date about all of the things that are going on with us. You can find and share our posts about whatever it is that we are doing, whether that's streaming TTRPGs, streaming Ramblemancy games, all of that good stuff. Just talking about us, clipping our streams, all fantastic ways to support us. If you would like to support us in other ways, financially, which we deeply appreciate, there are a variety of ways to do that. Coffee or our Streamlabs tip jar are fantastic ways to throw us just a one-time donation or to set up even a recurring monthly donation. You can sub right here on Twitch to get access to a few cool emotes. And we have a Patreon also that will be getting a little bit of the kind of like revamping treatment here in the next few months. But you can jump on our Patreon just for a variety of benefits that are listed therein. One of the best ways to support us is through that or our tip jar. So I think that is our and right, if you would like to find the entire backlog of all of our content that we have streamed here on the channel, or at least most of it, you can check our YouTube. That is where we make sure to post all of the cool shows that we stream here, and as well as Ramblemancy. You can also find Infinite Horizon, one of our more recent long-running shows, on podcast sites wherever pods can be cast. So.
Yeah. I will also go ahead and take this opportunity to say we do have a much lighter merch store. You will notice that there are quite a few items that are no longer in our merch store. But you can still get like just sort of the generic Rule of Lore merch. We get like that dope Rule of Lore. Why is it not on this overlay? this is my bad, and I will personally rectify this. But this awesome our awesome Rule of Lore logo merch that was designed by one Megan Murphy at Kawaii Not on Twitter. She does incredible work, and those logos and like those logo hoodies especially, it looks so good on the hoodies. Like I just can't get over it. But yeah, so we do have a merch store. It's sort of also going a bit of a renovation. But yeah, that's what we got. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming and hanging out with us. Geek Outs. I saw Rainy earlier, and Vertiman, and Littlest Drummer, Other Doc, and everyone else who came by to say hello. Thank you so much, everybody. We will see you next week for Ramblemancy. Possibly our last one before we go on break. We're still holding sort of like a who knows about the... Wait, is the next one the second?
The second.
Okay, so we're still holding off. We're not sure about the 9th. We'll announce the week of, probably, if we're going to do a Ramblemancy on the 9th. But we'll let you know. So we'll see you next week for Ramblemancy. But if not, we'll see you the next time you decide to come roll with us. Good night and good zone, everyone.